Hey guys, doing part 2 of the Wrath of the Old Gods card review. If you haven't seen part 1, click the video to my left and you'll be able to check out the part 1 video. If you want to see a specific card, you can click the card below and it'll take you to that portion of the video that shows that card. Anyway, let's get into it. Alright, so the first card we have is Stand Against Darkness. Now this is a 5 mana card. It summons 5 1/1 Silverhand recruits. So at first glance it may seem like a pretty good replacement for Muster for battle. Obviously you don't get the Light's Justice, so it's kind of worse. But then something you might notice is in GVG they're removing Quartermaster. So the power of this card goes down a lot without the 10 mana potential for Stand Against Darkness into Quartermaster to have just a ginormous board. That's totally out the window. So the only card you have that really synergizes with Stand Against Darkness is Warhorse Trainer, which not the most exceptional card in the world. Another big problem with Stand Against Darkness that you may run into is that all of the AoE cards have a very similar cost to Stand Against Darkness. So you're going to play Stand Against Darkness, you're going to be immediately vulnerable to Consecrate. You're going to be immediately vulnerable to things like Blizzard, Flame Strike's only one turn off, Holy Nova immediately can hit Stand Against Darkness. So it's just such a huge extension onto the board, right into exactly what your opponent's trying to do at that stage in the game. Next up we have Eater of Secrets. Eater of Secrets is a pretty underwhelming card in my opinion. It's a 4 mana 2/4 with Battlecry, destroy your opponent's secrets. For each secret destroyed, you get +1/+1. So, I mean, obviously it's Blizzard's idea of an answer to Mysterious Challenger, which is not going to be really too big of a problem since Paladin is losing Avenge, it's losing Minibot, it's losing Muster. So maybe it's a good answer to Secret Paladin in Wild or something. But in most cases, I think this card is just strictly worse than Kazan Mystic. Kazan Mystic's stat line's a little bit better. Kazan Mystic actually gives you the secret. So, I mean, this card just has really weak stats. It's really underwhelming as a tech card. I don't expect it to see too much play. Giant Sandworm. Giant Sandworm's a pretty interesting and cool card, but not the most impactful one. It's an 8 mana 8/8, and then whenever this minion kills another minion, it gets to attack again, which is kind of cool. Maybe you could have some sort of infinite chains of attack. It can't attack twice while attacking Divine Shields, which could be potentially a downside, but not really. If you're getting to attack with this thing, you're pretty happy. The biggest downside is 8/8 for 8 with no instant effect. And in Hearthstone, you really can't play an 8 mana 8/8 that doesn't immediately have a huge impact on the board or is Tyrion. So I don't think it's going to see too much play, but there's definitely going to be chances for it to see the light of day occasionally, maybe off of Ram Wrangler. It definitely increases the value of the card Ram Wrangler, which already had a pretty decent curve of finding solid minions. Now this is in the pool of things it can get, so maybe Ram Wrangler will start seeing more play. You can get it off Web Spinner, which I don't know if that is actually a buff or a negative for Web Spinner value. And then, of course, there will be VODs available at some point when this goes live, where people are going to go Giant Sandworm, it's going to stick, they're going to play Bestial Wrath on it, it's going to get immune for the turn and be able to attack into every single one of their opponent's minions and then hit their opponent in the face for 10. That will happen, I guarantee it. Next up, Hager, Doom of Elwin. So this is a pretty cool card. It's the Corrupted Hager, if you will. It's a 7 mana 6/6. Whenever this minion takes damage, summon the 2/2 Null with Taunt, like Hager would. So at worst, this card is a 7 mana 8/8 if it gets attacked by like another minion, if they're using minions to kill it. If they're using spells to kill it, it doesn't get that benefit of the doubt. But the only thing that really does that is like Entomb and Shadow or Death. So if you're not against Priest, at worst it's a 7 mana 8/8, which is fairly good. It's like okay, it's not exceptional. One thing I notice immediately is like it has the effect of when it takes damage, which is something that all of the cards in like Warrior and Patron Warrior sort of kind of synergize with currently. So maybe there's going to be a chance for this card to shine in some sort of Patron deck as just sort of like the new Doctor Boom in Patron. And maybe in Control Warrior, you could see some play in the same sort of thing with Whirlwinds, Revenges, Cruel Taskmasters, whatnot, to just get instant value out of it the turn you play it. Also, 6 health is really difficult to clear with 1 attack, so oftentimes it's going to get maybe 2 tokens spawned out of it, and this card getting 2 tokens spawned out of it is really good. So I think it's a card that if you're ahead on board, it's going to be really difficult for your opponent to find a way to deal with it effectively. Alright, so next up we have Calaxi Amber Weaver. This is a 4 mana 4/5 with the battle cry. If your Cthulhu has at least 10 attack, gain an additional 5 health. So I think this card's really underrated. I think it actually is pretty good. A lot of people have said that like it's just another Cthulhu card, whatever. But I think this card's pretty insane, actually. The reason being is because Cthulhu's attack starts at 6, so you only need to play 2 Cthulhu buff cards, really, because a lot of them are like +2/+2 to Cthulhu. So it's very easy to get your Cthulhu's attack up to 10. And the upside of this card, if you get your Cthulhu's attack to 10, is insane. You get a 4/10, which is like incredibly powerful. If you get a 4/10 on turn 4, with no prior downside other than playing like pretty okay on curve minions, which is what most of the Cthulhu minions are, is pretty sweet. And the downside of the card is just that it's a 4/5. And a 4/5 for 4 is not bad. So I mean like the downside is like, yeah, it kind of sucks, but like the upside is so big that it just clearly outweighs the downside for me and makes this card exceptional. All right, next up we have Ancient Shieldbearer. Ancient Shieldbearer is a 7 mana 6/6 with the battle cry, gain 10 life if your Cthulhu has 10 or more attack. So just like the previous card, it revolves around Cthulhu having 10 attack, which is we've like established is a pretty easy thing to accomplish. So that right off the bat means the effect is insane. It's going to happen pretty often. Means it's probably a pretty good card. And now we just look at what the downside is. How impactful is the downside of running this card? The downside is you're playing a 7 mana 6/6, and how bad is that really? 7 mana 6/6, not great, right? So it's a lot bigger than having a 4 mana 4/5 is the downside, but then the upside I think is even bigger than having a 4 mana 4/10, just because 10 life is so powerful in so many different matchups against face hunter decks, against face shaman decks, against even druid to some extent with the combo threatening, against freeze mage, against all these sort of decks. This is an effect that can just instantly win you the game on the spot, which makes it incredibly powerful. So I think this card is definitely going to see play. I think it's going to be a very solid card. Next up, we have Cocoons Chosen, which is a 4 mana 4/2 Divine Shield with a battle cry. Give your Cthulhu +2/+2 wherever it is. This card is, yeah, I mean, like, the stats are what they are, right? Like, a 4 mana 4/2 is really, really bad stats. The Divine Shield on that is, like, okay, that's more reasonable. Like, you have low health, high attack with a Divine Shield. It's like an Argent Commander without charge, which Argent Commander saw play back in the day. Maybe might see play again when Standard comes back and the cards are a little weaker. But yeah, it's not the most thrilling card. The disadvantage of the low stat sign with Divine Shield is they get to choose how they get to deal with the Divine Shield first, which means likely they're just going to hero power it off, so you're forcing them to hero power, and then they can kill your minion very efficiently. So the stat lines are in the okay to bad range. They're not good. And then I think almost every other Cthulhu buff card that's been released so far has been stronger than this one, so this is at the low end of the Cthulhu buff cards. But at the same time, +2/+2 is very strong because the Cthulhu stat line is 10, right? So if 2 of these cards get off to give +2/+2, you're already at that 10 attack stat line to activate all the other Cthulhu cards. So I mean, the card's not good, and it's not bad, but it's like just okay and almost bad. Like it's, yeah. All right, Forbidden Flame. Forbidden Flame, the next card, is a 0 mana card, but doesn't really cost 0 mana because the card text reads, spend all of your mana, deal that much damage to a minion. So it can't even go face, which is a big downside. But other than that, it's pretty versatile. Like it can either be up to a Pyroblast to a minion or a weak Fireball. So the versatility of it's great. You can do so many things with that, but the downside, the cost of this versatility is that at almost every single range of damage, like at 1 mana to deal 1 damage is weak. Normally you could get 2 for like Arcane Shot or things like this. And then at 3 cost, it's like, I mean, at 4 cost, you're using 4 mana to do 4 damage, which is what Fireball would be, but Fireball 6 damage, so you're just losing out all over. And I think the amount of damage you're losing out for the versatility of the card isn't worth running the card. I would rather just run those removal cards and call it good. I don't think the upside of the card outweighs the downside. Next up, we have the Forbidden Shaping, which is a priest card. A 0 mana card, again, that doesn't really cost 0 mana. It's spend all your mana, summon a random minion that costs that much. Again, super versatile, especially since it's with like your curve, right? You could, if your entire deck was this, you would play on curve every single turn of the game, which would be crazy. But would it really? Like, how often is a random minion actually good? And we've seen from Piloted Shredder that a lot of random minions are okay. A lot of mana minions, especially the 2-drop slot, are okay. But the things that get kind of wacky is when you get into other slots of mana costs. So like the 3-drop slot, for example, has a lot of really crummy cards. The 4-drop slot with Piloted Sky Golem. Piloted Sky Golem doesn't see play too often just because a lot of the 4-drops are so bad. It averages out to probably a 4/4, but a lot of times you're going to get like a 2/3 or a 3/3 off of a Piloted Sky Golem. So like there's different mana slots where Forbidden Shaping actually can't really be used consistently to get a good effect. So that really shapes how you can use the card, and then that affects the versatility of the card. So now you're spending all of this to play a card that gets really good versatility, and then at the end of the day you look at it and statistically you don't have really good versatility anymore. So I think it's too high risk, too high of downsides to really be worth the justification to run this card. Too many random minions are too bad at specific mana costs especially. Next we have Forbidden Healing. Now this is a lot the same lines of the previous two cards where you spend all your mana, heal for double the mana you spent. I think this card's actually good. The versatility on this card actually outweighs the downside, mainly because you're getting double and you get to heal for so much potentially, and healing is so powerful in specific matchups. So in some matchups where you don't need that much healing, you can heal for a little and be okay. And then against Face Hunter, against Face Shaman, things like this, where you can actually afford to spend an entire turn healing, you're allowed to do that with your deck, which is pretty cool. It gives you the option to just basically Reno Jackson against specific decks while still having 2-ofs in your deck. So against Face Hunter, for example, they're beating your face in and you get to like turn 8 and you're just boom, heal for 16. They concede, the game's over. That's it. So the upside of this card definitely outweighs the downside because there's just matchups you win now. You win against Face Shaman, you win against Face Hunter, you win against Freeze Mage. Like the power of just one card to completely win a specific matchup is really good. And like maybe in standard there's no Face Hunter, maybe there's no Face Shaman, but there's going to be a new face deck. Something will fill that role, and this card will counter that. So I think the card's always going to find a place, and it's always going to be pretty powerful with just how much net healing you can get out of it. Those were the thoughts on my second installment of the cards. Be on the lookout for my reviews of the future cards, and subscribe if you want to get a notification of when those videos go live. Bat out! So up next we have Cocoon, which is the kind of the big news of the release here. This is a 10 mana 6/6 that has battle